Hey angels, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Carly, and today we're gonna be going through my summer reads. So it's like August 9th, and basically I'm gonna talk you through everything I've read since June, I believe. Before we start, I do wanna talk about my ranking system. So I'm gonna be giving you my rating, my star rating of all of the books that we're talking about today. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I rate books. If a book gets a 1 star, it means that I only finished it as a hate read. None of these books have gotten a 1 star. I don't know that I've done that, a hate read, just because I get so frustrated that I will not finish a book. If I don't like it very much, there are too many books in the world for me to read, for me to waste my time reading one I hate. But that I never give anything a 1 star, pretty much. And I don't rate DNFs. 2 stars for me means that it had a lot of holes, or just like things I didn't like, but like plot holes, mostly things that weren't wrapped up, things that didn't satisfy me. That's what a 2 stars is for me. 3 stars to me is that some parts work, some parts don't. Some things really bother me, maybe some things I really like. 4 stars is it's good for what it is. So like the first book that we're gonna talk about is a nonfiction book about lady killers, okay? It's good for what it is. I think I actually gave it a 4.5 stars, but it's really good for what it is for being a nonfiction book. It's really entertaining. But 4 stars is good for what it is. I can appreciate what it's doing for its genre. It might not be like changing my life or anything like that, but 4 stars. 5 stars is that it is written for me. I am the target audience. It's about me. A 5-star book for me normally has to have like a level of like written pretty well, you know, but it is like I am the target audience. Pandered to. The first thing I finished in June, because that's usually how I do these. I think I started at like the 29th of May. The first thing I finished in June was Lady Killers by Tori Telfer. And this book has actually kind of stuck with me. It's nonfiction. It's deadly women throughout history. Lady Killers. I did not have high hopes. It's a nonfiction book that I got from a thrift store. So my hopes are not usually high. But I was so impressed with this. Every chapter is about a different woman from the past, from history, that has been a killer in some capacity. I think most of these murdered multiple people. I think all of them. It's been a minute. Okay, listen. It's been like 2 months. But they've got like every chapter is about a different woman, and they've got a nice little illustration of each of these women. And I thought it was really interesting because it told this story from the press's perspective, and then it also tried to give more of like what really happened and why the press was so enamored with each of these people. I thought that was really interesting, and I felt like it was much more nuanced than it necessarily even needed to be, and it did have like a good dose of humor. It was entertaining, and yeah, I was just really impressed with this book. I also, if you're a fan of morbid, you would enjoy this. I'm pretty sure they used this book for their Bloody Benders episode. But yeah, highly recommend. I think I gave this 4 stars. 4 stars for a nonfiction book about women killing people. And I will say it also made me think a lot about the way that I consume true crime and how it's different when women are doing the killing. It gave me a little bit of an uncomfortable seat to take on that one. So highly recommend. Yeah, Lady Killers. Hey, you moved. Sorry. Nice to see you over here. The next book on our list is Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls. This one I read as an ebook. It's a little novella. I think it's like 125 pages. Very interesting. I read it because I wanted something short, and it's about this like 1950s housewife who basically has like the creature from the Black Lagoon ends up in her backyard, and she ends up falling in love with him. I, at first, was really impressed with the way it was written. I thought it was really interesting as a concept, and I did not expect for like an 125-page novella the writing to be as good as it was. There were some choices at the end that I was really confused about, but overall, it's a short little read. It was interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd recommend it. It's a weird thing to... Who do you recommend that to? Like, you seem like maybe your marriage is bad enough that you could fall in love with a creature from the Black Lagoon that escaped his aquarium and like ended up in your backyard. Who is the target audience? I don't know, but I did enjoy it. She got a 3.75. I think the choices that were made at the end really pissed me off. That happens a lot for me, and a lot in these actually. I am sensitive to there being a lot of plot twists at the end. Like, that makes me angry because I feel like you're just fishing for something here. I don't really know. But like, if it makes sense with the plot, I'm fine with it. But then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, you're just trying to do, you're just doing tricks, you know? Like, this is gratuitous at this point and I'm not enjoying it. Yeah, I feel like there was something along those lines there. Or, honestly, I feel like it felt like a little bit like a cop-out. The ending was like a non-ending to me. I wanted more, I think. Next, we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Okay, this one I also found in a thrift store. I read the physical book. Here she is. Gorgeous, gorgeous girl. I vaguely knew that it was listed on some like LGBTQ lists that I'd seen. I don't know what I expected, but it's very much like character-driven gang of misfits of like different species are going on an adventure, which is like adventure stuff is not usually my thing. And I'm usually very intense about my science fiction. I want it to have something to say. I want it to be using the science fiction, like that avenue has like, there's just so many things you can do with it. Like there are so many fun things you can say. And I do think that this book does that in a bunch of really fun ways, in the sense that there are all these different species from different planets, and these species all have different cultures that are informed by the planets that they're from, the types of bodies that they have, and the way that they interact with each other is affected by that as well, by the differences in their species. I thought that was so fascinating and so much fun. Like this was she really, really did that. Like that's what I enjoyed most, was learning more about the different cultures. And yeah, there was a lot to learn. There was a lot of different, like a lot of moving parts going on here. This was a 5-star read for me. I had so much fun reading this book, and I am not much of a series reader, which this is gonna be so indicative of that. I read this in June. The whole time I was like, God, I hope this never ends. Please tell me there's more books. There's several more books. Have I read any of them? No, I haven't. Will I? Probably at some point. But I never find myself like hoping that the book doesn't end and like hoping for more in the series. And I did. So I think that's a huge testament to like how fun this story is. Next we have Murder on the Links by Agatha Christie. This is the second Hercule book. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm not French, okay? Anyway, I thought this book was very funny. I read it as an ebook. I thought it was funnier than a lot of the other mysteries I've read by her. It did the thing where there's just like twist after twist after twist, where at the end of it, I'm like, this is not a crime that would actually happen. This would never actually happen. This is ridiculous. And because of that, it got a 2.5 stars for me. I honestly, beyond that, could not tell you anything else about what actually happens in this book. Someone gets murdered on a golf course. And then there's twist after twist regarding that I would be spoiling if I told you anything else about the book. So there you have it, 2.5 stars. I don't know that I would recommend it. It is really funny, but I don't know that it's worth how much the plot twist at the end pissed me off. Next we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. Okay, so you guys know that I've been on my romance journey, and Emily Henry has been holding my hand and guiding me the whole way through. So Happy Place was the obvious next step from book lovers, and I did enjoy it. I'm a sucker for a good setting, and this had that. But I will say that every time I like made a note about something I appreciate from Emily Henry, right after it would be contradicted. Like I would continue. I listened to this as an audiobook, by the way. I found that that's my like drug of choice for romance books. That's like how I cope with all the things that bother me about them, is that I don't just sit there and stare at the page at that really cringy thing someone just said. The person just said it in my ears and then they stopped and they kept talking about something else. So that happened here. Like I was like, the first note I made was Emily Henry's characters seem to be more self-aware than I think most romance books characters do. And then they did something that I was like, yeah, yikes. So that happened, and then something else. I think there was like a cringe moment or something. I don't know. For me, at least, I still would recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. It's romance for the non-romance reader, I believe. But I also learned that I'm a fan of a second chance romance. My personal romance is a second chance romance, so why wouldn't I love that? I did take a little bit of issue with some of the stuff that was going on. I haven't even told you what this book is about. This couple, I'm trying to go fast, okay? I know I've got a lot to get through here. So, this couple, couldn't tell you their names. It's been 2 months, okay? This couple is a part of a larger friend group, and their friend group from college takes a trip every year to Maryland. I don't know. It was a good setting. I don't know. There was like seafood. I don't know anything about that part of the country. Anyway, they take this trip. This couple has broken up like 6 months ago or something, 9 months. I'm not sure, but neither of them have told their friends, and now they have to go on this trip. And it turns out to be like a wedding for someone that's in the group or something. Basically, the stakes are that they don't want anyone to know that they've broken up because they don't want to ruin the trip for everybody. So they pretend to be in a relationship after they haven't spoken for like 9 months or something like that. And I thought that was pretty good. I'm not a fan of the like, I like for my circumstance to be believable. And that's part of the issue that I have with a lot of the romance books, is that they're trying to satisfy these tropes that are like forbidden love type. But in order to get there, they make the stakes like not very believable for me. But for this one, I believed it for a good chunk of it. There were some times that I was not hanging on, but enough. It was enough for me. I say all that to say I did really enjoy some of like the lovey moments between them, and I looked at this and saw that I'd given it, I think, 3.5 stars in my notes at the time. And I don't know that was fair. Yeah, at the time I rated it 3.5 stars, and I felt like maybe that is not so fair. Maybe it was 4. The more I think about it, it was definitely a 3.5 star read for me. There are some of these that looking back, I was like, dang, that's a little harsh, but that one, I think that's about right. Next, I read It Came From the Closet, Queer Reflections on Horror by Jo Valise. I really was looking forward to this. And so this is a collection of short stories that are all by different short stories / essays, ? I think they're calling them essays in the thing, but by a bunch of different authors. And this is, I think, my first time reading something like that, where it's a short story collection and every one is written by someone else. And I felt like it was very inconsistent, probably because one of the very first stories was essays was loved. One of my favorite authors, Carmen Maria Machado, wrote a short story about Jennifer's body. I just pandered to, there's not a universe in which I'm not obsessed with that essay. It doesn't exist. So I knew that was going to be like really, really, really good for me. And I didn't know how anything else was going to be. And that set the bar really, really, really high. That essay is insane. Okay? It's so good. I wrote that almost all the rest have paled in comparison. I don't even know how many I'd read at the point that I wrote that note, but I wrote it. There were a lot of other ones that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the Nightmare on Elm Street one. There's one on Get Out that's really fascinating. And a lot of them, I think the issue that I took with some of them is that I wasn't seeing the connection very much between the essay and the movie. And I felt a lot like some of them were like, here's my experience as a queer person, and I'm going to relate it to my favorite movie. And to the person who lived those experiences, yes, totally. I'm sure see the connection. Me, I don't see it. So some of it I felt like was really relevant and put together, but others not so much. Yeah, also I know I'm wearing sunglasses this whole time. I like the way my hair looked with them back, but it's starting to get on my nerves, so they're coming off. Anyway, I hope that satisfies everyone who was just waiting for that to happen. 3.75 stars. That was a hard one to rank, just because I kind of knew what I was getting into with everything being different, but I also just like, when you have Carmen Maria Machado writing an essay on bisexuality about Jennifer's body, the caliber of work that you're putting out there. And yeah, man, I don't know. I feel like we got to keep it consistent, Anyway, It Came From the Closet, 3.75 stars. After It Came From the Closet, or actually probably alongside, because I read whatever simultaneously. But I was listening to probably along like throughout all of these, just because I don't think I was listening to an audiobook, or I haven't listed a single book yet that I finished in June that was an audiobook. So I guess I listened to this audiobook for all of June. But we have Down the Rabbit Hole, Curious Adventures and Cautionary Tales of a Former Playboy Bunny by Holly Madison. And this is not something I would typically read. I don't think I've ever read anything like this. It's like super pulpy, like kind of memoir, celebrity memoir type thing. And I'm forever changed, I have to admit. Holly Madison, I've been so curious about her story and about just the Playboy Bunny life in general. That was just like such a big deal growing up. Like I was just exposed to so much of that media, which was so weird anyway. But anyway, oh my God, it was so fascinating. I ate it up. Perfect as an audiobook, because it's like Holly Madison is just like telling you what's up, just giving you the drama. And she's changed the names of some people, but they are very easily accessible on the internet, because I did not even have to dig. People have written articles that are like, want to know how I figured out who everybody in this Down the Rabbit Hole is. So it was super fun. Every chapter starts with a quote from Alice in Wonderland that's like related to the story in that chapter, and that are very poignant, like very on point, the quotes that she's leaving throughout the chapter. So I really enjoyed that. I give it 4 stars. It's really good for what it is. I do feel like there were some moments where like she kind of contradicts herself, but she's a girl. She's really young when all this happened. So, but yeah, I found myself really rooting for her, and oh my gosh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun to read. I'm grinning just talking about it. But I also highly recommend it as an audiobook. I feel like that was probably the most like fun way that I could have read it, because I was just listening to it driving around, especially being in Los Angeles, and she's talking about, girl, this is gonna come back later, but she's talking about trashy lingerie in Los Angeles, and I'm like, girl, I went there this week. That's so crazy. So yeah, highly recommend. 4 stars. Holly Madison's book. Next, I read Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. I actually had a physical copy of this book, but I lent it to a friend. This book was so good. I gave it a 4.25 stars. This is telling, I'm probably gonna fudge this, so bear with me. But Bryan Stevenson worked as a prosecutor, he worked as a defense lawyer. That's what he was. He was a defense lawyer in the South, specifically in Alabama. And he worked to help get rid of the death penalty and to help death row inmates that were wrongfully convicted or otherwise. He just really did a lot of work to reshape the image of what death row is and who gets disproportionately convicted, and yeah, how those people are treated, how they can be railroaded, and how a lot of times the thing that gets someone convicted and put on death row is like a public outrage, and not necessarily the fact that they were convicted like really well, that the evidence was really solid against them or something like that. And his work is really powerful. It was really close to my heart, because a lot of it was happening in the South and in Alabama, and I felt it's so important to talk about the injustices that happen in Alabama. But a lot of times those injustices are overshadowed, and we don't hear about the people in the South who are fighting to make things better. And so I really appreciated that perspective, and like show that not everyone in the South is a racist, horrible person. You know, some people are fighting to make things better, and I think that was a very valuable perspective. Yeah, and it wraps up June. So those are all the books that I read in June. That's 8 books. I think I read 8 books, yeah, in July too, and I've read 2 books so far in August. So we're about halfway through. The next book I read is The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. I got this out of a little free library. A lot of times and I'd never heard of it, so expectations were low. I'll just put it that way. And then I think on Goodreads it had some pretty good ratings, but it's like a mystery, thriller, suspense situation. It's set in the 80s. It's kind of like jumping back and forth between real time or present day and the 80s when all of this stuff happens. So a series of crimes, happens in, I'm trying to remember, okay? A series of crimes happens in the 80s. This kid and his friends, you have like a losers club. Very, very it. It's very much done in the style of it. I was like halfway through this being like, dang, you're really going there, huh? Because it being written with, you have your losers club, and then also being written half in the 80s, half in present day. So this group of friends gets some chalk throughout. There's a lot of things like politically happening in their hometown that they're aware of, but they end up all having chalk, and they all have their own colors, and they draw chalk men on the ground outside of, like, in their driveway of their friends, to communicate with them. So like if you know that I have the orange chalk, you have the blue chalk, I come to your house and write in your driveway a chalk man like pointing to the park, and so you know that we need to meet at the park. And yeah, I thought that was a really fun concept until these chalk men start getting involved in these crimes that happen. And a lot of really bad things happen in this book. I thought at first, I was like, I do kind of believe everything that's happening, like that I can kind of hang with. And then by the end, they did the thing that I hate, where they put way too many twists in at the end. And I'm like, girl, you have made your point, okay? This is not realistic anymore. Like, it gets to a point where it's like 3 twists ago, this was believable and real. And I was with you. And I thought you could have ended there. And then 3 twists later, we're not even in the same book anymore. Not only are we not on the same page, we're not on the same book anymore, because I've thrown it out because I'm so mad that you put so many twists in. So anyway, Chalk Man, I think I gave 2.75 stars, and I really enjoyed reading it, but I get so mad at the end when they pull all this crap with the twists. Chill out. If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I knew I was gonna like this. Dark academia vibes. I read Secret History. I wanted to read it since I read Secret History earlier this year. And I did really enjoy it. I also, as a dance major, was like, thank you, Dark Academia, for coming over to the fine arts side of academia, because it gets dark. I've always felt like the arts were a really rich place to explore a lot of the concepts that people explore in dark academia. I mean, just think about like the force proximity of these performances. Like, there's just a lot of fun to be had, and a lot of fun was had here. To me, using like fine arts academia for dark academia books, it is a playground, and this author treated it as such. There were a few things that I was a little bit like, come on now. I know that this author went to like they had a master's degree in Shakespeare Studies from King's College London, so they lived this. And there were some things about like stagecraft that I was like, didn't feel like the novel explained very well, and I was like, girl, you know this stuff, what are you talking about? So there were things like that. And then at the very beginning, they're quoting Shakespeare, and they do continue this, but at the beginning it really icked me out that they're quoting Shakespeare at each other. Like, I was like, this is like, I'm not talking a couple of phrases, like the phrases everyone hears. I'm talking multiple sentences at a time that they're quoting of Shakespeare back at each other. And that was corny to me. Later, it ends up making sense in the context of the book. I just feel like it could have been introduced a little better. So if you start reading this book and that starts to turn you off, stick through it. This was a really fun read. I did believe everything that happened. There were some crazy twists at the end, but ultimately, the killer was who I felt like it should have been. I'll put it that way. But yeah, very fun book. She got a 4.5 stars. Very fun to read. Good book. Next, I read The Silent Patient by Alex. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. I read this as an ebook, and I swallowed it. I swallowed it whole. I ate this book very quickly. I read this book very quickly. I have to say that because it happens a lot with these books that end up pissing me off. Look at a low rating, but I did enjoy reading them. So that is worth saying. I did enjoy reading this book. I thought the concept is that there is this psychiatrist who runs down this patient. There is this patient who her husband dies under mysterious circumstances. She is a witness to it, allegedly, and then she ends up accused of the crime, and she will not speak afterwards. She's been institutionalized, and she will not speak at all. And this psychiatrist hunts her down, like intentionally gets a job at the institution that she is at, and then exclusively treats her when he's working there. And that's fishy, right? I felt like that was fishy from jump. I don't know. Spoilers. whoever trusted this character? Whoever trust? Like, I would say that this is like a fun little unreliable narrator, but like, you never trusted them. I didn't even have a chance to trust this narrator. That's only fun when I trusted you to begin with, and then at the end, I'm like, that's you, sneaky little boy. But I did not ever trust him because this is ridiculous. Why would I think that any psychiatrist that followed a patient to treat them was of sound mind or a reputable psychiatrist? Like, what are you talking about? So, okay, that rant is over. Basically, they tried to do a bunch of twisty stuff-ish. It was hinted at pretty, in my opinion, pretty well throughout the book. They tried to do some twisty stuff and like really make a statement. I didn't feel surprised by the things that were happening, and I felt like, I don't know. I did not like the direction that this book went in at all. For a long time, probably, actually. So she got a 2 stars, which was kind of disappointing. It was easy to read. And when I talk about these, that like this disclaimer that I made at the beginning of this one, that I ate it up, I think it's just that it's an easy, pulpy read. But that don't make it good. So, 2 stars. The next book we have is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. I don't know how to pronounce that name. Sorry. So good. I read this one as an ebook, and it is about this young woman. It is told from the perspective of this little sister, but this young woman is like 14 years old, and she allegedly becomes possessed, and her parents make the choice to star her in a reality television show about being possessed. And obviously they have like a lot of things that fed those choices, but the young girl's possession is told from, and the story of the reality television show is told from the perspective of the little sister, who is, I think, about 6 years old, who is enduring like watching her sister go through something really horrific, and then also watching that be broadcast, and like what would motivate her parents to do that and all that. Like, where's everyone's heads at for all of this, you know? This little sister is grown telling the story to a reporter, and this book is so good. This book does twists right. There was a twist at the end that I was like, okay, maybe that was a bit too far, but it still makes sense within the context of the story. There were so many things done right about this book. I enjoyed it so much. I highly recommend this book. 4.25 stars. Really, really good. Like, I'm a fan of this author now. And I think that's all I get to tell you. Like, I think you just have to go figure out everything else on your own, you know? But I also have to let it be known that I have a very similar book coming up in my list. It takes a little while to get to it because of the other books that I finished in between, but I think it was the very next ebook that I read that was so eerily similar to this that I couldn't believe there were 2 books in this same genre. So, more on that later. But the very next book that I finished was The Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman. I listened to this in audiobook. This is the second book in the Practical Magic series. Somehow, I did not read that when I actually read all of these books, except for that one, in like 2022. So I was like, let's just pop on into that world, get a little Practical Magic summer up in here. So also, I think it's worth mentioning, June was Pride. I read 8 books during Pride. Hold your applause, I know. I was also out a lot because it's Pride, and I had a blast, but I was like, by July, I was like, we need to stay inside. I'm never leaving my home. I'm never leaving this cozy little Papasan chair. Which obviously did not happen. Also, I did have to leave my Papasan chair, and I did go party a little bit, but it's brat summer. Who could blame me? I was trying to keep the there was a moment where I was like, there needs to be a Practical Magic summer. I need to stay in the house, make midnight margaritas in my home, and just be on my Papasan chair, okay? And this was my attempt at doing that. It was half-hearted, and it did not work, but for a few reasons. So I listened to audiobook. This had a narrative that was too complicated for an audiobook. There's just like only certain narrative books that I can do in an audiobook. This was not one of them. On top of that, reading this book, apart from reading the series, just did not work very well. If you're gonna read those books, just read them all or nothing. Like, honestly, I could reread the rest of them and probably like throw that one in and enjoy it a lot more, but I just wasn't I don't know. It was fun to revisit those characters, but I wasn't as invested as I could have been if I had read everything at once. So I suck at reading series. This is not news to anyone. But because of all this, I gave it 3.5 stars. Some things worked for me, some things didn't. And they also might have all been my fault because I made some choices regarding the reading of this book that were unconventional. But anyway, the next book I read is Player Piano by Kurt Vonnegut. Oh my gosh, what a choice this was. So this book is from the perspective of this man who is a engineer manager in a world where almost all jobs have been mechanized. So like factory jobs, all like general labor for the most part. And so when you go into the career field, you have a few options. You can be an engineer/manager, which means that you either make the machines that have taken everyone's jobs, or you manage those machines. What does that even mean? I don't know. I think essentially what he does is make sure some buttons are pushed every day. You can do that. You can go to the army, or you can be in the reclamation and reconstruction crew, which they call the Reeks and Recs, which is essentially like taking care of the city, like city maintenance type of stuff. And obviously people are not really happy that all of their jobs have been replaced by machines and that the only options they have are to go in the army or Reeks reclamation, because also here's the tea. The way that it's decided which one of these things you're going to do, why wouldn't everyone decide to be an engineer manager? Great question. I'm glad you asked. That's because you have to hit an IQ level. So when you're in school, you take like a standardized test, and if you don't make a certain level on that test, then you either have to pick between the army or Reeks and Recs. So people are not happy about that, and this engineer manager starts to see some issues with this situation that his father actually built, and shit hits the fan. A lot of really, really relevant things to right now are happening. This is worth reading today. I wouldn't go in expecting just any other Kurt Vonnegut that you've read, because to me, part of what's so great about his work is that he's discussing these really bleak topics with that classic Black humor of his. And I just did not get as much of the humor in this book as I'm used to getting from him, and that I kind of needed a healthy dose of to be able to stomach some of the stuff we're talking about, especially because he wrote this in like 52, I think. He would be sick to know how relevant this is now. So 4.5? 4 stars. Not my favorite Kurt Vonnegut, but I'm a fan, so I'm gonna it's all gonna work for me, you know? The next book, we have The Office of Historical Corrections by Daniel Evans. This is a book of short stories, and then the last story is a novella by the name of the title. I also had conflicting feelings about these stories. Some of them were really strong and some of them were not so strong to me. I ultimately gave this a 4 stars at the time, but I think it's more like a 3.75 stars for me, just because it really hasn't stuck with me. Normally, if things like really work for me, they stick with me a little bit more, and I don't remember a ton of this to tell you about it. It is really good. The concept of the novella that is the title, The Office of Historical Corrections, is that there's a group of, there's a department developed in the government, that seeks to work against misinformation. So they go out into the public, and anytime there is something written that is not true or misinformed in any capacity, they are to correct it and like just put a cute little sticky note that's like, hey, by the way, this is not what this is. Yeah, and I thought it was a cool concept, and then a lot of fun and nasty things could happen from it. What ensued was like a little bit of a mystery, and there was some dialogue in the mystery that I was like, you could have handled this situation so much better, and none of this would have happened, and we were not led to believe that this character would behave this way. Like, I don't understand what's going on here. But yeah, other than that, I did enjoy the book. Not my favorite. And I think really the thing is, I was told that this was going to be like life-changing, like really freaking good, and it just did not do that for me. Okay, back to what I was talking about earlier with, what's her name? Head Full of Ghosts. Head Full of Ghosts was about a family who has something tragic happen to their teenage daughter, and they decide to capitalize off of it by making it a reality television show. And would you believe that I read 2 books that month with that exact premise? No, me neither. So the other book I read was Kill Show by Daniel Swerin Becker, I believe. And very different. This time a teenage girl goes missing, and her family makes the choice, after they are pursued by a reality television producer, to televise their search for her to come home, which is insane, but not as insane as what actually happens. This one had some crazy plot twists, and some of it was pretty believable, but then they kept trying to, which pissed me off. That's why it got the rating that it got from me. And that rating is a 3 stars. I did really enjoy it. It was very different. It could not hold a candle to A Head Full of Ghosts, which is a shame because I probably would have enjoyed this book more if I wasn't like kind of comparing the two, because I read them so close to each other. They're so similar. But yeah, I don't think it was trying to. It seemed like to be a very different animal, like very much more like thriller suspense type vibe. And Head Full of Ghosts definitely was more like horror. And so they're different worlds. They're living in different worlds, but they're doing such similar things that I just couldn't help but compare the two. And this one definitely was not as good as Head Full of Ghosts, but I would still recommend it. I wish I'd read it at a different time in my life. But yeah, if that sounds like something you'd like, Kill Show, there you go. The last book I read in July was Every Bone a Prayer by Ashley Blooms. I read it as an ebook, and I gave this one a 5 stars. I'll just tell you right out the gate, because I was really surprised at some of the ratings that I saw on Goodreads. I enjoyed this book so much, and I don't know if it's because of the setting. I don't even know where to begin in telling this story. It is told from the perspective of a girl that is about 8 to 10 years old, living in rural Appalachia in a trailer with her mother and her sister. Her dad has just left, and she has the ability to speak to things. So a lot of what she speaks to are these crawdads in the creek by her house, and she speaks by telling them her name, and her name is a series of memories that she communicates just by thinking towards these animals, and the animals share their name, and which is a series of memories, and they communicate. She can communicate with crawdads, she can communicate with her trailer and like see the memories of her trailer. It's really powerful and beautiful the way that she can interact with all of these different like objects. But something tragic and traumatic happens to her that keeps her from being able to share this part of herself with, her family or anyone. And the magical realism kind of like takes off from there. But I just thought this was so beautiful and like heart-wrenching. Like, this story, I cried for like 3 hours the morning that I finished it, and was like, I'm forever changed by this story. And I like could not recover that day. Like, I was different all day. I could not cope. So I don't even know where to begin. I feel like the setting really helped me. I don't know if it was just because it's just a really like fertile setting for like magic. I feel like the type of magic we're talking about feels so real in this setting to me. If you have if you grew up in this setting, maybe that's what it is. But I highly recommend. I will say, look up trigger warnings, because there's some sad stuff that goes down in this book. But 5 stars, cannot recommend this book enough. It is so, so good. The next book I finished and that was all for July. So the next book I finished started out August, and I finished the audiobook to Word Slut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language. I think that's what it's, yep, by Amanda Montell. And I read a couple of books by her. I've learned that this is like the kind of book that the kind of nonfiction I need to listen to. And I learned so much from this book for a nonfiction book that's telling you about like linguistics and feminism and like the origins of words and how we use them and what they mean and all of that. She covers it all. She covers more than I could have asked for. She talks about why people have an issue with the word female. She talks about why people have an issue with the word bitch. She talks about why like a lot of our language around sex is violent, like hammer, nail, screw, all that. yeah, and I thought that was all really, really fascinating. She answered a lot of questions I had. I think pretty much every question, and I think also my expectations might have been a little higher if I didn't have already read some of her books, but all of the questions that I expected her to answer in this book were answered, and then some. She talks about like queer culture and queer language and how it has influenced all of these other parts, like how now everybody says work, you know? Didn't used to be that way. But anyway, she covers a lot, and it was very good for what it was. I gave it a 4.5 stars. The last book that I have finished so far, I can't believe that was the last book that I finished. I had a friend in town for the past like week, so I have not been reading as much, but the last book that I finished after that is Tom Robbins' Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. Okay, you know I'm a Tom Robbins stan. I'm gonna love anything he does. This book also felt like it was pandering to me, but I did not feel like, we'll get there. This book was pandering to me because it's about lesbian cowgirls on a ranch, for the most part. It's also about a girl who has humongous thumbs who hitchhikes all over the place. And I think that's also as much as you need to know. It was really good. I really, really enjoyed this book. To me, here's my problem. I'm a still life with woodpecker apologist. I feel like, okay, so first of all, I never see Tom Robbins books like in stores, and I got this at a thrift store, but I saw this book at Barnes & Noble the last time I went. And so I looked up the movie too. I haven't watched the movie yet, but between this and Jitterbug Perfume being like more popular than Still Life, I'm like, what am I missing over here? Why is this one more popular than Still Life? And so I was like ready for this to dethrone Still Life as my favorite. And when we first get to the ranch and everything's happening with all these cowgirls, I was like, okay. But I still feel like so much of the magic of Still Life is it for me. So this got a 4.5 stars for me. I had so much fun reading this. It took me a little longer. Not all of it happens on this ranch, and when they leave the ranch, I'm like not as interested, and I'm not reading it as quickly. But Mr. Tom Robbins would be so proud to know that the bookmark I used in this book the entire time was my Trashy Lingerie membership card. So that belongs there. It is what it is. And I finished that this afternoon. So that concludes my summer reading so far. And summer's not over. Unfortunately, it's so hot here. You'll never hear me say that, but I'm so tired of summer. I'm so tired of summer. My birthday hasn't even happened yet. I'm like ready for Halloween really bad. But that concludes my summer reading for now. Maybe I'll have a little check back in or like a little rest of August, whatever. We'll see what happens. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you've read and enjoyed or hated any of these books, I want to hear your opinion. That is so fascinating to me. I love when I love a book and people hate it. I want to hear what you have to say. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. What has been on your summer reading list, and what do you have left to read? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.